Smallz.
Hey, this is former Sixer and Tar Heel George Lynch. Smallz, you're killing me.
Hi, this is Kenny Albert. You're killing me, Smallz.
You're killing me, Smallz.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Killing Me Smallz podcast. I am your host, Mike Small. You can follow me on Twitter at RealMikeSmall. You can subscribe to the Painted Lines and get all kinds of Sixers and Philadelphia content, as well as cultural stuff as well. But this is a big day, and it's a fortuitous day, as for the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to get one of my journalistic idols on, and that is this gentleman right here, Bob Ryan, who you all know from his years at the Boston Globe, the sports reporters. He says he's retired, but I still see him on Around the Horn, hear him on The Ringer. He's got multiple podcasts, so I'm not sure what retired looks like to you guys, but Bob, I think you're keeping pretty busy. But I think we're actually fortuitous in having you on today, because I wanted to talk to you about the NBA and particularly the Sixers-Celtics rivalry. And just a couple hours ago, Shams Charania from The Athletic reports that the Sixers and Celtics are discussing Ben Simmons going to Boston, and the Sixers want Jaylen Brown. I'm going to guess that you don't love that idea. And welcome to the show.
I want to clarify retirement. It is a technical term. No, seriously. That means you are no longer in the full-time employee of a company, in my case, the Boston Globe, for whom I worked 44 years. So I am no longer, do not have a boss. I do not have a full-time job. I do have a couple of little things going on. I have 2 podcasts. I write every other week for the Boston Globe, and I write and I still appear on ESPN's Around the Horn on a bi-weekly basis as well. So it does sound like a lot, but believe me, compared to having a real job, it's not much. It's enough to keep me busy. Now, this is disturbing news that you have given me. And when we're done, I will proceed to organize a vigilante committee to make sure that once any plane lands with Ben Simmons, that he will not be allowed to deplane. And maybe I have to get some auxiliary help up from state troopers on the border in case they try to sneak him in by car or even rail. But this is
so you're very open to this, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, I really want a guy. I really want a point guard. You have to take out of the game in the most important games of the year, because he can't shoot free throws and he won't shoot the basketball. Oh, I really want that guy. Yeah, that's really helpful. Why would anybody want this guy is what I want to know.
Well, what's funny is Brad Stevens was the first person to expose Simmons in that 2018 playoff run, when he built that wall and the Celtics were without Kyrie and Hayward. And, then all the shoot the 3 coward shirts came out from the Boston faithful.
Yeah, no, all kidding aside, the big question for me, Mike, during this previous offseason of all potential NBA issues was, is there a market value for Ben Simmons, and what is it? Because he is the oddest player of consequence in the 75-year history of the league. And I think I can speak as a reasonable good historian of the NBA, that there has never been a player who has attained all-star status and is considered to be a superior player, who has such a monumentally flawed game. And I'm including all the centers such as Shaquille and others who couldn't shoot free throws, because there's never been an alleged point guard or a player who has the ball in his hands as much as Simmons does, who has this gargantuan flaw in his game and this gargantuan psychological flaw, period, about shooting the basketball. So he's unusual, to say the very least. And all kidding aside, I wondered what his market value was. Obviously, Daryl Morey thought he or hoped. I don't know if Daryl's smart. Did he really think people would give him 3 number 1s or all this stuff, or whatever that he thought? Obviously, it didn't happen. And now he's going to have to take X cents on the dollar, whether it's 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, whatever it is.
So I have a theory, and I'd like to run it by you. My theory is, it's not a groundbreaking theory, but my theory is that Daryl Morey was asking for the moon because he wanted to buy time to see who was going to be available. Was Damian Lillard going to ask for a trade? Was Bradley Beal going to ask out? And could he buy time to December 15th when all those players that signed extensions or free agent deals are available to be traded? So I don't think he ever expected to get that. It's nice to throw it out because you never know if someone's going to give it to you. But that's been my theory all along, and now we're getting down to it.
I mean, I want to give Daryl Morey, obviously he's a bright man, the benefit of the doubt in that regard. So that's a very interesting theory, and if that's the case, it would make sense to me. But all kidding aside, and I'm not, I like to kid about Ben Simmons. He's a fun topic to talk about, obviously. But do you agree? There's never been there's no parallel in the history of the league.
Well, one of the questions I had for you is one of the things, you're kind of the Doris Kearns Goodwin of basketball here. And I was going to ask you for a historical parallel because I can't come up with one. No, I've watched every game this guy's played, every single game this guy's played in the NBA. And there are times that he can dominate a game without scoring a point with his defense and his passing. Mm-hmm. There are times that he can, hide and destroy you in a game, as you saw against Atlanta in that series last year. If somebody could unlock that, where if the guy shot 75% from the free throw line, and then he would have the guts to go to the rim, who cares if he shoots? Because he would dunk and get fouled. It's just one or two little things. If somebody could unlock it, I think he could be amazing.
Well, yeah, but it's a little deep into his career now for no improvement to have been made. I mean, I after the first year, I said, okay, obviously, I said, they're going to lock him in the gym for 3 hours a day in the summer with an armed guard to make sure he doesn't get out. And he's going to shoot jump shots. He's going to come out and he's going to become a reasonable shooter, to augment the rest of the good, fine parts of his game.
Right.
Well, obviously it didn't happen. Or if it has happened, he stood there for 3 hours and sulked or something. I don't know. But it hasn't happened. In fact, he's gotten worse. It bottomed out in the last playoffs, as you pointed out. Bottomed out. Now, all right. Now, I don't want to be cow. If he does have a serious psychological problem, then he's got to address it. Then now I'm reading that he's resisting their urgent treatment or the recommendation for treatment. I don't know. I just know what I'm hearing and reading. Yeah, they got a real problem on their hands. And why would any other team? Oh, I know. There's always, no matter what the circumstance, somebody thinks I can fix whatever it is, whoever it is, whether it's, all the recalcitrant great players in the history of all sports. But this is still an unusual task that anyone would be assuming.
Yeah. I mean, how many of these coaches and GMs believe their own press clippings where if you just put them in my culture, I'll fix it? I mean, personally, I think he should be in San Antonio because if there's ever a place that could fix it, it's with Chip England and Pop and that whole crew. But, I agree with you. The question I have back to you is, whenever these things get reported about this team having interest or that team, and we've heard, Minnesota, Sacramento, we've heard all kinds of things. It's the first time we've heard about the Celtics. And coincidentally, it's a couple days after Marcus Smart called out Brown and Tatum. Excuse me. Where does that leave you in terms of what you think the future of the Celtics is, if they're even considering that? I'm
trying. I mean, it was awful when you first heard it. You go, "Oh my God, this is awful." But knowing the nature of the three people involved, I think it can be fixed, really. But I am still. I come to it with mixed feelings about Smart. I've long been a member of the fan club, and I've defended him against all kinds of attacks about his game because of the good things that he does do. But I think he oversteps his bounds at times too, personally, in terms and like some people, a lot of people, he may not be quite as, dare I say it, smart as he thinks. But I think that can be fixed. I don't think that's the problem. They actually responded with two good games on the road, and a third one when they got beat on yet another Doncic buzzer beater in Dallas the other night. I don't know if you know that was a carbon copy of what happened to them there last year. Exact same thing. An impossible shot by Doncic beats them at the buzzer. They came from. So I think they're playing. They seem to have, righted the ship a little bit. We'll find out anyway. But I'm not positive, but it looks that way. And Tatum, by the way, bounced back with a big game the other night. And anyway, so that's their issue.
I mean, let's be honest. They're all great players. I mean, Tatum and Brown are great players. The question is, will it work together?
Together,
will
I
it?
know, and
Yeah.
and that is a question. And
It's the Simmons and Embiid thing, right?
Yeah, except that except the nature of the game. The one guy, Embiid's a 5, or he's a 4.5, or he's a 6-2, or whatever guys a modern big is. He is one of the if not the quintessential modern big.
Yeah.
That's fine. Whereas Tatum is a forward, Brown's a forward. That's it. Period. I mean, that's it. They still are recognizable as forwards. But it's so anyway. But they do need to play better together more consistently. They have on many occasions. I think one of the issues, I'm playing total guess game here, is that Brown last year took a step up, and it was his best year and made the All-Star team, averaged his career high. He's still not Tatum. And I think he puts himself on the exact same talent level, exact same level as Tatum, and he's not. Maybe he's having a hard time adjusting to the idea that in the pecking order that Tatum is and always will be higher. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
So if you had to keep one, you're keeping Tatum for
You're
sure.
keeping Tatum, yeah. Yes, I am. And that's it. Therefore, and by the way, I know reputable people who would like to trade Brown for some people. And there's one good friend of mine who I would do a podcast with, Jeff Goodman, who's been selling Brown for Beal for for a year. He's in love with Beal, and I resisted it, but Bradley Beal's pretty damn good. So that's another matter.
Well, maybe there's a 3-way trade coming. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Sixers have been looking for another trade partner, but I want to get into the Sixers a little bit, and then I definitely want to come back to the Celtics and the rivalry, if that's okay.
Sure.
You have a long-standing relationship with Doc Rivers. You've been on record talking about how much, I think you called yourself a docophile on your last podcast.
Yeah, something like that. Sure.
Is that a word? We'll use it.
Oh, yeah.
See, I listen. I pay attention. With Doc, my thought was, all right, Ben Simmons is being enabled by Brett Brown. Now you have Doc Rivers. He's going to unlock him. Doc was not able to do it, although he defended him more than anybody. And then you saw that debacle after Game 7. What is your thought about Doc Rivers? And first of all, the job he's done, and what could he have done differently with Simmons? Or are you thinking if Doc couldn't do it, nobody can? I'm just wondering your perspective on Doc with this whole thing.
I'm leaning more toward the latter because Doc is all about people as well as the X's and O's. He's the consummate modern coach, and he understands. He was a player of consequence. But he also was a player who rode a bench at the end of his career. He understands the full spectrum of NBA existence, shall we say, and pretty much the full spectrum. And he's just a bright and he's a sensitive person. He's a normal human being. You can imagine Doc as your next door neighbor, believe me, as well. He's eminently normal, and I'm guessing that he tried everything he could think of. And he can't unlock him. He can't. I have some reason to believe that that's the case, and then let it go at that. I think, quite frankly, he would. No, I shouldn't. I would think that he'd breathe a sigh of relief. The headache's out. It's somebody else's headache now. I wish we could have figured out a way to unlock this, but I've given up, and I'm just as glad that he's gone, kind of thing. He won't say that publicly, but I'm gonna bet that would be his reaction if and when Ben is ever traded.
I think that's going to be the entire city's reaction, quite frankly. But when you see the Sixers starting out as they have, best record in the East, best offense in the league without Simmons, does this buy Daryl Morey time, in your opinion? Is this? Do you think at what point does this end? I mean, it's got to end with a trade. I've got to think there's no way this guy's coming back.
Well, I mean, right? I can't imagine it's going to extend into the trading deadline in February that would go that far. I can't imagine.
Right.
I don't know. We have these arbitrary checkpoints, Thanksgiving, Christmas, 25 games into a season, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, I don't know, but you know, they have to be feeling good about themselves the way they're playing, and you know, more power to them. You know, I mean, but you know, Embiid's a tremendous talent, and they have one of the most underrated players in the league, and Seth Curry, I think, and people are starting to, if they haven't realized by now, that he's pretty good.
He's been unbelievable.
Yeah, you know. And then they got a weapon and coming off the bench, and Kirk Moss. I know he had a good game last time out. But I haven't seen them yet. I'm only following them from afar, so I haven't had a chance to see them yet. But obviously, I always root for Doc, and I'm happy that it's off to he's off and they are off to a good start. But the question that you pose is very interesting. Yeah, what does it buy Daryl time? I guess, you know, but I don't know. Where is Daryl's the Daryl the fan, Daryl the basketball guy, as opposed to Daryl the guy who has to be the GM to pull the trigger? You know, what does he really think about Ben Simmons? You know, or is it got the case of no matter what he thinks, he knows he can't get it out of him, he's got to get rid of him, kind of thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's been reported that Daryl was never truly bought in. You know, Daryl's an analytics guy, and you know, 3-pointers, and you know, Simmons is not that. And you know, he took over from day one and really made it Joel Embiid's team, which it should have been, but it wasn't with the previous regime. And you know, the James Harden opportunity that the Sixers failed going for Harden, you know, definitely Simmons was involved in that as he had to be. Mm-hmm. I guess at this point, if you're Daryl Morey, you can't give him, you know, you've made this power play, you know, it's your legacy too. So I guess the question is, at what point does he try to save face versus make the best deal?
Yeah.
And, you know, he said he's going to let him sit for 4 years if he has to.
Well, you know,
your point, I can't imagine it.
In terms of the saving face thing, as you just pointed out, he wasn't Simmons, you know, Simmons wasn't his guy. He inherited it.
No. This
phenomenon. You know, and that's what he is. He's a most unusual player in the history of the league because of as I said, and there's no parallel, none, and not at that stature. I mean, plenty of guys who just stunk, period, but nobody that has this kind of monumental strength and corresponding weakness in his game to the extent that he has it, never been seen before. So, and once again, I'm not counting big men who can't shoot free throws. I'm not counting Shaq. Right. I'm not counting. I'm trying to think of who was a very notorious one, and I'll think of it. But there have been others in the past with free throw problems, but nothing like this. Anyway, he's not Daryl's guy, so Daryl shouldn't. I think Daryl knows that around the league, most people are saying, "Boy, I'm glad this isn't my problem." Although apparently, a few of them got their hand up, and it's going to happen. Don't you think?
Well, I think it's going to happen for one reason. There are markets out there that will never attract a free agent even close to the stature of Ben Simmons, no matter what you think he is. And if you can get a guy like that in a trade, you're going to do it because he's locked up for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, if you're Minnesota, if you're Sacramento, if you're, you know, all these type. Now, I don't think Boston's in that situation. That's why I'd be surprised if that deal happened.
I don't think so. You know, obviously Boston isn't. Although, you know, the free agent thing is interesting. They never really got a final life free agent until they got Al Horford. And
Anthony Davis didn't want to go there.
And I said for a long time that Boston, you know, was viewed as an old, cold Eastern city. The modern people don't care about the floor and the flags and that's all. I mean, after all, they only have one once in the last 35 years, by the way. And people around here tend to forget that. They still cling to this nonsense that they're all about championships, which I just reject thoroughly. They shouldn't be all about championships because, you know, who are you to be so pretentious to think you deserve a championship? You won one in 35 years. So,
well, they got the Patriots up there, so that.
Well, I'm talking about the basketball fans.
I know, but that kind of bleeds in there for the arrogance.
Oh yeah, the city itself has gotten, you know, so overfed in the 21st century, and now we got a verge of yet another one because guess who had the best record in MLS this year? So you know, that's the you know, we could have another championship around here. But anyway. Anyway, there we go. I'm babbling, so stop.
No, I love it. It's great. So, God, I hate to revisit this. Markelle Fultz was almost a Celtic.
Yeah.
And you know, we've heard many rumors about that that middle of the night tryout where he just sucked in front of Danny Ainge, and they made the deal with the Sixers. Do you have any insight on that looking back a couple of years?
Not really.
Heard stories?
No, because the flip side of that is the positive nature of Tatum and the fact that there's, that Tatum was so enticing to them. And they felt he was every bit worthy of being a number one as Markelle Fultz was. But, so I don't have anything. I just heard the same kind of stuff you heard.
Well, I think in Sixerland, we're hoping that the Matisse Thybulle Carson Edwards trade made up for that. Probably not, but not terrible.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Carson Edwards, talk about comet flashing across the sky. He got people teased around here by making 8 3-pointers in one period in an exhibition game in Charlotte last year.
Yeah, and that was it.
That was it. That was pretty much the sum total of his Celtic contribution. I wish him well. He's apparently a fine young man. I really thought he was going to be okay. I liked him at Purdue, but it just hasn't happened.
So aside from those 2 deals, historically, have the Sixers and Celtics ever connected on a major deal? I can't think of any.
Not major. And it's funny you mention that because the peak of paranoia, if you will, came in the 80s at the who was the draft? There was a draft, and I know specifically that Pat Williams and Red, well, it wasn't really Red more than it was Jan Volk who was running the team then. We're in a battle, and there's somebody was drafted as a block on the other guy. They basically, the team took the one guy because they didn't want the other guy to have him, which very rare in history of the NBA. But that rivalry was really sizzling back in those days. I think it's cooled off. I don't think it's as vibrant as it was, but I can tell you I've been up here for 53 years. That rivalry, I remember Bird, for example, everybody framed the Celtics in terms of the Lakers. And when Larry retired, he told me that the rivalry that stoked him the most was Philadelphia at the time. And I can believe that.
Well, that was my era of growing up, Bird and Dr. J and Moses and Tony and, all that stuff.
That was wonderful stuff.
That was the glory days for me.
I remember in the 79 exhibition season. No, I know 80, I guess it was. Remember in 79, Birds are rookie 79-80. Mm-hmm. And the Celtics go and win 61. They get beat by the Sixers in the playoffs. And they got beat by the fact that they were that Darryl Dawkins and Caldwell Jones overwhelmed them up front physically because the Celtics were very small with 6'8", 6'9", 6'5" front line. And that's when they went out and got McHale and Parrish and changed not only the Celtic history, but the league history. Anyway, I can remember the Celtics played the 76ers in an exhibition game at St. John Arena at Ohio State when Bird was his second year. And the Sixers beat them. And I remember they were still a benchmark team, and I remember thinking the Celtics, this is the hurdle they got to climb. They got to be able to beat this team. And of course they went up doing so in a very dramatic, as you know, fashion in 81, coming from 3-1 down. But then
the reverse in 82, right?
Yeah. And then in 82, the same thing. They came from 3-1 down, but this time the Sixers shocked the world. They won that 7th game in Boston, fair and square.
Yep, the beat LA chance.
Yeah, Dr. J had a real big fourth quarter, and they won that game. But that was the peak of the rivalry at that point. And then eventually, but Andrew Toney, my feeling, you're looking at the regional president of the Andrew Toney fan club. I think he's the most forgotten great player in NBA history, certainly in my time, and that people forget how great he was. And the only thing that did him in was not one, but 2 bad feet, 2 injuries. He was ridiculously unstoppable, frankly, for most people. And, I just hope people remember how good, and Philly, how good Andrew Toney was.
The Boston Strangler is the best nickname and most apropos nickname of all time, in my opinion. Although I got to give, Larry Legends.
I called him, he played with contempt. He was a contempt. You looked at you with contempt. Double teaming made him laugh. I mean, really? You kidding me?
Yeah. I mean, it was money in the bank when he would go to the basket.
Then
and just
the third one.
That shot off the backboard in every time.
And then, he had great range. He could go to the hoop at will, go left or right, and don't foul him. He's going to make them. I mean, and he seemed to be more happier when somebody was on him than it was when he was wide open. That was like no fun. Too easy.
The NBA is at its best when the Sixers and Celtics are both good, and they have contempt for each other, to use your word, as they did over the last couple of years. Although the last 2 years, it's kind of slipped a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's all it's been, you go back to the Wilt Russell days, obviously, is all
Sure.
it really heated up then, and goes up. So now you got to go all the way back to the early '60s. But boy, you go back and do research anybody on some of those series, and and then of course the '65 was the Havlicek stole the ball series, and '60s, oh boy, on, and then '67 the Sixers beat them in 5 and win the deciding 5th game, 140-116, and that's laying it on pretty good. And
that's pretty good memory right there.
Went for Wilt's numbers in that game. You ready? 29, 36, 13. That's not bad.
Wow. Is Wilt underrated when you look back at him? When you start hearing everybody talk about, Michael Jordan and LeBron and these guys are the GOATs, and you think about Russell's championships and Wilt's individual ability, where do I know that you had a vote in that top 75, but where do Wilt and Russell fall in your opinion with these guys?
Well, first of all, you have to separate centers from the non-centers when you're talking about who's the GOAT, because the job descriptions are so dissimilar that it is truly an apples and oranges. So that's number one. When you're talking about who's the GOAT, you got to talk about, think about all-around players, guys who can do everything, play offense, defense, handle the ball, shoot the ball, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, that's not the job description for centers, although now the modern bigs are asked to do more than a different, but it still isn't the same as everybody else. So, look, any discussion, Mike, of GOATs and top players, any discussion, at the least in the top 10 are 3 centers, very possibly in the top 5 of greatest players in the history of the league. 3 centers in some order, depending on your preference: Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They are in any discussion unarguably in the top 10, and I believe firmly in the top 5. The top 5 players.
Where does Hakeem Olajuwon fit in there? Not too far back.
He's number 4.
Yeah,
he's the 4th best center. And then you got Magic and Michael and LeBron, and here's your best 5 players of all time. It's very simple, really. I don't think it's that hard, and it's not that hard. And then the next guys up are Bird and Magic. And they're 6 and 7. And to me, that is non-negotiable. Those are the top 7 players of all time right now. Now, there's one other guy now knocking on the door, and that's Durant. And then there's Curry, who's the greatest shooter of all time. And he's probably a top 10 now already. But Durant's the next one up. If anybody's and followed by Duncan. And or if you might argue the other way around, and I wouldn't fight you on that one either. But those are the next 2 guys up.
I don't disagree with you. Actually, I think Duncan is historically underrated because even though he has all those championships, I still think his understated personality and playing in San Antonio hurt him for those types of records.
You're exactly right. And none of that should ever matter, but it does. And to a degree, but absolutely Duncan. But now Duncan was fortunate same as Russell was fortunate in a way that, and to a degree, Michael was fortunate when he finally hooked up with the right coach. Duncan would not have been allowed to be himself to the extent that he was if he played for someone other than Pop. I really believe that. That's the perfect marriage right there. And Russell told people, including myself, me to my own face, that there's no way he would have won all those championships, as many as he did playing for anybody other than Red. He would have won some, but not as many. And that he needed to have a guy that understood him the way Red understood him. And so there's that. All right, now back to Wilt, because that's how this all got started.
Yes.
Wilt, the only comparison to Wilt in terms of physical dominance in the league is Shaq. And my quarrel with Shaq and why I rate him below Olajuwon is I think he was an indifferent rebounder for his size. It boggles the mind that guy with that body and that agility and that athleticism with the 280, 300 pounds, whatever, never led the league in rebounding. He should have led it every year. And rebounding is want to. Number 1, here's the rules of rebounding. 1, you want the damn ball, or don't you? 2, establish position. 3, hold the position. 4, go get the ball. jumping is the least important asset of rebounding, and the number one important asset is do you want the damn ball? And that's why Moses Malone, by the way, we shouldn't ignore in these discussions as to how high he rates. So, but Wilt went and got the ball as Russell did. Wilt, look at the game was different, of course, but Wilt's numbers are just science fiction when you look at it now. Yeah. I mean, averaging 50.4 points a game in a season. Now, he played for a coach that allowed him to do that, Frank McGuire. That wouldn't happen with Red, I can tell you that. But Wilt should never be, my God, forgotten. He's still one of the great phenomenon in the history of American sport.
How do you think? Last question for you. I know I've kept you long.
Oh, no problem.
I could do this for another 3 hours, to be honest with you. I love this, and I can't thank you enough. It's really an honor to have you on. I watched. God, I grew up watching the Sports Reporters. I read your column. Back when I used to actually get newspapers, like the physical newspapers. That was pretty fun.
There's nothing to prevent you from getting a newspaper. I don't want to hear this. I read 5 a day. We get 2 delivered at home. We get the Globe and the Times at home, and I go out and I buy the USA Today, the Boston Herald, and the New York Post. I
buy my Philadelphia Inquirer. I admit that.
Okay,
I do.
No excuse. I'm sorry.
No excuse. No excuse.
None at all. Not for any literate person. Any literate person should still be holding the newspaper in his or her hand. Period.
Somebody did one of those. I regress a little bit. Somebody did one of those things. Said something like, "Name something that kids today would never understand." And my answer was believing what the guy on the news says and going out and buying a newspaper and believing what everybody in the newspaper says because the sources were vetted. And people are like, who reads a newspaper? And I was like, oh, good Lord. But in any event,
yes.
Wilt, athletically, would it hold up today? If you put Wilt today on the Orlando Magic,
oh my God,
would they be a top team?
Any team that had Wilt today with the modern athleticism, the rest of these guys, I mean, who's better? Who's out there that would stop Wilt from doing what Wilt did? Nobody. There's nobody in the game today who's going to stop Wilt from doing what he wanted to do. The only guy that ever did that bothered him consistently was, in fact, Russell, who was the smartest player probably of all time. But Russell and played the psychological game with Wilt and in many ways. But Wilt, please, and the idea, this nonsensical idea that athleticism is a modern phenomenon, that there weren't quote unquote athletes who could run and jump and do all the things that are supposedly associated with athleticism in the 50s and 60s. It's ridiculous. No, there were more of them, but don't tell me there weren't any. There were plenty of them.
One of the things that people don't know about you is that you're very generous with your time. There's a young, you don't even know this. There's a young college student named Dawson Moore out in Iowa.
I know who it is.
Father works with me, and he told me about your interaction with him. And I was like, I wonder if he'd go on my podcast. And he gave me your email. Just the fact that you're so giving of your time for things like this and for young aspiring journalists, you're a credit and national treasure. And I really can't thank you enough. And I hope I can get you back on here one day. You know
how to get in touch with me. I'd be glad to come back, Mike, anytime.
I do. Absolutely. We'll get you loaded with some better technology next time. We had a lot of fun getting that working, but
oh yeah,
it's an honor to have you on here. Bob Ryan from everything. I think 16 books. Is that correct?
15. I'm on my 15th. And
what are you writing right now?
By the way, in the most important debate of all, Geno's.
Not Jim's.
Not Pat's.
Jim's.
Not Jim's. I think Jim's. That's an acquired taste. But I'm going with Geno's.
Okay. All right.
9th and Pat's.
All right.
I had to get there.
Okay. I'm Jim's, but I think that's my cop out of staying out of the Geno's path. But I've always liked Jim's, so I was a South Street kid.
It's fine. Okay.
Fair enough.
All right.
Bob Ryan, thank you for joining the Killin' Me Smallz podcast. Again, you can subscribe to the Killin' Me Smallz podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube under the Painted Lines, and follow me on Twitter at Real Mike Small. Thanks, everybody.